Travel has come up a lot, and if you like to travel, or even if you don't like to travel, but you have to because your family has roped you into some sort of a road trip, and you're counting on Medicare to cover you in the event of health problems, you're going to want to watch this video all the way to the end. There are two types of travel to cover here. The first is domestic, and then we'll go over international travel. Now, they are handled differently, and they each have holes in what they cover that you'll need to find a way to cover yourself. Now, domestic travel, when dealing with Medicare, means traveling within the 50 states, the District of Columbia, Puerto Rico, the U.S. Virgin Islands, Guam, the Northern Mariana Islands, and American Samoa. All of these are considered part of the U.S. healthcare system from a Medicare perspective. So if you have original Medicare only and you're traveling domestic, original Medicare will work the same, meaning any providers or facilities that participate with Medicare will take your original Medicare coverage. Likewise, if you have original Medicare in a supplement plan, same story. Any provider or facility that participates with Medicare will take your original Medicare coverage option and your supplement plan. Now, about 50% of all Medicare beneficiaries have chosen to replace original Medicare with a Medicare Advantage plan, and these behave differently. Advantage plans have what's called an emergency care benefit. Under this, Advantage plans are required to cover emergency health care as in-network. So if you're traveling outside of your coverage area or your state and you require emergency care, your Advantage plan will cover this as in-network. This benefit is typically structured with something like a $100 copay per emergency visit, and then if you're admitted into the hospital within 24 hours, that copay is waived, and then you pay the inpatient hospital copay that is part of the Advantage plan. To clarify, if you break your arm and you go to the emergency room, they are going to treat your broken arm and probably release you that day, so a $100 copay. Alternatively, if you have a stroke and you go to the emergency room where they stabilize you and then they admit you into the hospital to stay for a few nights, the $100 copay is waived, and now you pay the inpatient copays, which for most plans are structured as something like $300 a day for days 1 through 5. That dollar amount and the number of days does vary by plan. So hopefully that helped make some sense of how emergency care works. Also, there is usually an urgent care benefit with most Advantage plans. Similar idea here where there is a copay. This is different for each plan, but we'll call it as an example, $40 copay for urgently needed service. If it is not emergency or urgent care, your plan's coverage will depend on the type of Advantage plan you have. The two most common Advantage plan network arrangements are health maintenance organizations, referred to as HMOs, or preferred provider organizations, referred to as PPOs. There are others, but those are the two most common. With an HMO, if you get non-emergency care out of network, you are likely going to be responsible for 100% of the cost of those healthcare services. HMO plans typically do not have any out-of-network, non-emergency coverage for you. With a PPO, if you get non-emergency care out of network, you will have some form of network coverage. It won't pay for as much as if you had gone in network, but there is some coverage. Oftentimes it's something like the plan will cover 70% and you pay 30%, or you will have higher copays than normal, or some variation in these numbers. There are some Advantage plans with nationwide PPO networks that are quite impressive, but most Advantage plans do not fall in that category. Now, when you go out of network, most PPO plans have a different out-of-network maximum out-of-pocket that is higher than the normal in-network maximum out-of-pocket, so something to keep in mind. Now, you can insure against pretty much everything these days, and there are agents who will want to insure you against everything. I'm of the belief that overinsurance is pitched far too often, meaning pushing more insurance policies than you may need. So I'm going to talk about travel insurance. Just know that, as with all insurance plans, there are circumstances and reasons when this makes sense, and there are others when it does not. So let's address those. Whether you have a supplement plan or an Advantage plan, if something goes wrong on your trip, Medicare is not going to cover any emergency travel if you need to get back home. It isn't going to cover an evacuation. It isn't going to cover any of your non-refundable plans that you may have made that would be messed up because of a medical issue. It isn't going to cover your lodging if you have to stay anywhere unplanned because you or a spouse had a medical issue. If you are a subscriber to this channel, you know that my family and I are going on a 48-state road trip. If you're not a subscriber to this channel, you're going to want to do that because on this trip, I'll be covering how Medicare is different in each state across the country. As you can imagine, this trip has a lot of hotel reservations, 30 to be exact, and plans that can get completely derailed if illness or sickness or accidents happen, like Disney tickets, for example. In our case, a travel insurance plan makes sense. If you are planning a big trip and you are worried about any of those other types of costs that come from medical emergencies, look into a travel plan. If you need help with this, or you'd like to look into these travel plans, please send me a message to the email that is in the description of this video. Now, if you're going on short, simple trips to visit your kids or grandkids in another state, you can look into a travel plan, but probably aren't needing much of anything outside of the coverage that your Medicare arrangement already offers. Okay, let's move into a few strange circumstances that kind of fall into a gray area of Medicare domestic or international coverage. Medicare may cover, and that is their verbiage, it may cover inpatient hospital costs, ambulance services, or dialysis for the following circumstances. You're in the US when emergency treatment is needed and the closest hospital is in a foreign country. For example, you are closer to a hospital in Canada or Mexico if you're on either of those borders. A similar but slightly different scenario is when you are a US resident but a foreign hospital is closer to your home than the nearest US location that can treat your condition, regardless of whether it is an emergency. Again, maybe you live in the US near the Canadian border or near the Mexican border and their hospitals are closer. Another situation is if you are traveling through Canada between Alaska and another state when an emergency situation occurs and the closest hospital is in Canada. In any of these situations, the foreign hospital is not required to file a Medicare claim, so be prepared to submit an itemized bill to Medicare. Now, the last weird bridge between foreign and international travel would be a cruise. Cruises get a little bit tricky. A lot revolves around where the ship is licensed. While on a U.S. cruise in international waters, you may be covered for medically necessary care if the ship is within 6 hours of a U.S. port. Most cruise liners have medical personnel on staff, but check with the cruise company before you leave if you're concerned about available medical care. If the ship is not a flagged, licensed U.S. ship, it won't matter where in the world you are. If you need medical care on board, it would be charged as the country where that ship is licensed. For example, you're on an Alaskan cruise, but the ship is licensed in Bermuda and you need to take medical care on board, that would be charged as Bermuda even though it is around Alaska. In this case, you're dealing with the international coverage policies of the Medicare arrangements that you have, which we will cover right now. We're moving fully into the international travel rules here, and right out of the gate, Medicare drug plans do not cover prescription drugs that you buy outside the US. This is for those who are planning to travel internationally, or if you're just looking to get prescriptions from foreign pharmacies while you're here in the US. For international hospital and medical care, supplement and advantage plans handle this in slightly different ways. Medicare supplement plans C, D, F, G, M, and N cover some travel abroad emergency help. No other Medicare supplement plans provide international travel emergency coverage. Now here's how that works. When you travel outside of the US, those supplement plans cover emergency health care after you have paid a $250 deductible. After you pay the deductible, Medicare and the supplement plan pay 80% of the billed charges for certain medically necessary emergency care with a lifetime limit of $50,000. As we've shown in other videos on our channel, $50,000 in billed charges, even if it's outside the US, where in the US billed charges are insane, it isn't that hard to hit, especially in an entire lifetime. So after $50,000, you are responsible for 100% of the costs. This coverage does not cover emergency travel, evacuation, or any non-refundable stays or excursions that you may have scheduled that would be canceled due to a health problem. Now, these supplement plans with international emergency coverage indicate that the medical issue must begin during the first 60 days of the trip. This is important. If you have a supplement plan and you're going to be out of the country longer than 60 days, this coverage no longer applies. On day 61, you're left on your own. So my supplement plan friends, if you are planning on being out of the country for more than 60 days, a separate travel insurance plan is a smart option, or a short-term medical insurance plan within the country that you plan to visit. For those of you with supplement plans E, H, I, and J, these plans are no longer sold, but they still cover foreign travel emergency care as they did when you purchased them. Now, Medicare Advantage plans handle things a bit differently. An Advantage plan has a benefit called emergency care and something to review with your plan. For many Advantage plans, emergency coverage applies worldwide. So that same detail that we mentioned with domestic travel and Advantage plans applies with international travel. Most Advantage plans are paying 100% of the costs after normal copays of all emergency claims with no cap while outside the US. In most of these comparisons between Advantage and supplement plans, I don't really come out and say which one is better or worse than the other. They're just different. In this case, Advantage plans and their travel coverage is typically a little bit stronger here, and I would say better than the supplement plan and original Medicare arrangement. Many Advantage plans have a longer period of time as well, so rather than that 60-day window, they're able to extend that longer to more days into the 100+ day range. Now, once you are stable, you are on your own for follow-ups if you don't come back to the US. Also, same as domestic travel, neither the supplement nor the Advantage plan is covering any non-refundable reservations. They're not covering lodging costs or evacuation costs or travel back to your origin city or back to the US. Let's talk about all of that. If you are planning on international travel, those other travel insurance plans that we went over during domestic travel really start to make even more sense. Where you intend to visit will make a big difference in what you'll want to consider, but there are travel plans that are medical insurance designed to reimburse you for medical expenses that come up when you are traveling or living in a foreign country for 2 weeks to 2 years. These kinds of plans can include things like emergency evacuation, reunion and repatriation benefits, meaning the cost of getting you back to the US, as well as accidental death and dismemberment and travel assistance. You can set maximum coverage levels and choose your deductible amounts, which all affect the cost of getting these plans. So since you can tweak these coverages, you do have more control to dial in the costs that fit you. Coverage is guaranteed without underwriting, meaning anyone who pays the premium is automatically covered regardless of medical history. There aren't medical questions that are asked. And this next part really only applies to a very small percentage of people. There are plans for kidnap and ransom insurance. This would apply to those who plan on traveling to high risk or war risk countries. This could be for business or for humanitarian efforts. Now, believe it or not, I have learned that we have had Hollywood celebrities, former professional athletes, politicians, and other very affluent individuals tune into this channel, people who may actually encounter situations where kidnap and ransom insurance apply in a different way. Now, I do have a secret keyword at the end of this video to prove you made it to the end, but the point of the video is this. If you plan on traveling, you do have some protections for your hospital and medical through Medicare in varying levels, depending on the plans that you pick. Medicare does not cover many of the other things that apply when we have health issues away from our homes, and for that, there are travel insurance plans to consider. If you have a big trip planned and you'd like to look into these options, please reach out to me. My email is in the description of this video, or you can connect with me on theretirementnerds.com. Okay, to prove you made it this far, the keyword has to be around travel, right? So let me know where your absolute favorite travel destination has been. Not where you want to go, but where you have been that just took your breath away. If you want to see the big differences between Advantage and supplement plans that are more applicable outside of just travel and more around care in the US, I'm biased, but I think that this video here is the best Advantage versus supplement comparison out there, and I will see you over there.